Drums keep pounding a rhythm to the brain. La da da dee. Da 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 da. Drums keep pounding a rhythm to the brain. La da da dee. Da 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 da.
So there we go. We are back with another Mitch and the Mike live stream. Wouldn't be a Mitch and the Mike live stream without a couple of issues. I'll unmute everyone so that way I don't forget later on. We got Zach Ryan and Ben Panic here. How's it going, boys?
Really good, mate. I must comment on the video. Awesome job. I'm not sure who did that intro video, but pretty sick, mate. That looks really cool.
Yeah, I think it was I think it was Jeno's daughter's partner that did that one.
There you go. Good job.
Here. Great video, although I must say, 10 scale electric, not what we're talking about today. So we're talking about something a little bit more sensible, which is 8 scale nitro. I do have to say that, is it just that the Chargers track looks large, or is it large? Because it looks like it's kind of 1/9 scale in size.
It's pretty big track. Yeah, it is quite a sizable track, fairly wide lanes. Yeah, I'd say it's definitely larger than the average 10 scale track. That's for sure. Not comparable, I'd say, to Pine Hills, but not too far off in certain ways as well. So gives it sort of a general idea. But I'd say majority of the shots probably sort of up close to the cars, make the background look bigger, as most men would know from photography skills. Okay, off that topic, Ben, how are you going as well?
Good, mate. Back from Perth and the Nationals, so great to be with you today. Eyes have recovered after getting blown away with dust for 4 days there, but we had a great time. Awesome event. Club did a fantastic job, and it was a really, really good time, and the weather played its part for once, which was great.
Yeah, it's pretty rare you get 4 days for a Nationals and actually have no rain, at least something happened. I think the biggest issue was probably the wind out of everything, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was fantastic. I mean, the club just did such a sensational job. I think RCRA, tip my hat to them. The event, it just had a really good feeling to it, right? It had a good vibe. It wasn't overcomplicated with scrutineering. I just think it was all run really, really well. So hats off to Tom Van and, all of the committee and, the folks at MORBC, just a great job. And, for those that weren't there, they also got some fantastic online streaming. I mean, that was unreal to come home and see some of the video that was shot live. Was really, really good. So super enjoyable event. I don't think I heard anyone who didn't like it. I think the only thing that we all had a bit of a problem was we were there for unlimited pizza on like Friday night. An old mate on the pizza van, I tell you what, once he hit 70 pizzas, he was pulling stumps. He was out of gas. Fuel was run out, flamed out. He was done, and everyone was ready.
One cranky pizza man. Yeah.
We're going to go through Pizzagate soon as well. We got that all. We got that all on the talking points. But yeah, Pizzagate was definitely a big talking point of one of the days/nights there. It was funny, but also I think a lot of people missed out on a lot of pizza, so probably a bit miserable for some people. Yeah, as you mentioned as well, the committee. We'll start off with the committee and the efforts that they put into the actual track, the facility, to get the event up and running and everything, like as well as RCRA. Like they obviously had nutted this out real early that the schedule was premium from RCRA and the track itself, as Zach had actually put on his talking points, that they had quite a lot of rain leading up to the event that stalled them out quite a long way to have that track in such a great racing condition. What you guys' thoughts on that sort of side of things? Any add-ons to
that? Yeah, I mean, we were texting Craig because Craig Lawton flew over to build the track, and we'd sort of seen the weather leading up to the week that he was doing the rebuild, and they just got hammered with rain. And anyone who knows building a track when it's really covered in mud is super difficult. And hats off to them for getting done what they did during sort of what was pretty wet conditions. And I know they sort of did a lot of time after Craig left as well, but they got it done. And the track came up really good. Probably the best groove that we've seen there for a while. I would probably say it was slightly better than the Worlds. And, we probably chose the right tyres this time opposed to the Worlds, which was good as well. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of effort that goes into building a track, and a lot of people have put in so much time for free, and that's really, really important to highlight, just the amount of effort that goes into building a track like this. And it's not a cheap exercise, and we can probably delve further into that, but it's probably something that we're going to need to sort of consider going forward. Luckily, Perth have such great facilities. They've probably got, on par with the best facilities in Australia. Awesome undercover permanent pit areas. Driver's stand that can, suitably fit 15 drivers. They've got race control area for the media crew. They've got a compressor bay and washdown bays and canteen. So all those sort of things help reduce their cost. But talking with Martin, their cost for rebuilding the track was still in the vicinity of $12,000. And when you take into account the income from entries, that's not really covering the base there. And so, the only way that they're going to really break even or make a bit of profit is through the canteen. If this was a club that didn't have the infrastructure that these guys do, they would have probably made a lot less money, because they would have had to obviously invest in tables and chairs and marquees and lights and everything else. So,
Yeah. I think things aren't getting any cheaper either. Like, realistically, when we talk about the prices of, say, building a track and the lights and, say, as you mentioned, like a marquee and stuff, none of those things are getting any cheaper at the moment. It's all going up in price. So it's not like next year's going to be like, all right, well, the track build next year is going to be $5,000. And it makes it harder and harder for each club to sort of hold a national titles in certain ways, especially tracks that don't have, as you mentioned, the facilities that MORBC actually did have. So, but yeah.
Yeah, it's a tough one. I mean, I got a pretty strong view on this because at the end of the day, these clubs are not for profits, right? They're run by committees, and anyone who's ever been involved with building a track or maintaining a track, it just takes so much work, right? It really does. The team did an amazing job given the amount of rain they had. But if you think about it and consider, that rule around 50% track change, if that was removed, I think it would make it much, much better for the clubs. At the end of the day, what I'd like to see is the clubs come out of a nationals, and instead of being maybe a couple of grand in the hole, be, $10,000 or $12,000 ahead. How do they then take that money and make their facility better? I think it also takes out, that weather. If you look at when the build took place, Craig kind of slopped through with a bobcat of 4 or 5 days of rain, really challenging. You probably don't get the best track that you could have gotten because the weather plays a part. You're trying to build it a few weeks out before the nationals to give, the club a chance to run at least one race meeting on that minimum race meet that they get, and then present a track. They did a great job in terms of putting a track forward for us to race on. But I think the club's done a disservice by that. I think there's a better option for the club. And at the end of the day, the same people are still at the top, right? It doesn't matter whether, you're a WA local and you've had 6 months, worth of practice on the track. I've got no issue going to a race, where the WA guys have been on the track for 6 months. If I wanted to, I could fly over there 3 months before and, do some testing myself. I think that the result is a better facility and a better track. And that's what we should all be striving for at the end of the day. We see the on-road worlds on at the moment. Jeff Hammond and Jesse and the guys are over there. They didn't rebuild the track before the worlds, right? You can go to that facility at any time and run laps. Cream always rises to the top. And, I think that's something that we need to consider, or we drive people away from it. And that's not what we want. We want strong committees. We want people who want to come back year after year, whether it's a local club or a nationals level club or a state level club. You want that committee to feel healthy, energized, and not thinking, holy shit, what have I done? Signing up for this for a year, I'm never going to do it again. And we've all seen that happen.
I think that happens probably 90% of the time, doesn't it, really? Like, you host a big race and then the committee goes, man, that's it. I mean, we saw it even at the Sunny Coast. You know, they had a really dedicated committee, and you know they needed a break after the nationals, and they just didn't have as many club days for a couple of rounds after that, which is completely understandable. And we even do it at Pine Hills. We've taken a bit of a step back and gone to club racing once a month because it just is just too much on the committee to do it fortnightly. So I think we probably need to just take a bit more of a look at the rules and see what we can do to skew the rules to be more in favor of one, growing the infrastructure at clubs, and so the clubs can be better in the future, and that means that they can save money when they host big events. So if you, for instance, didn't need to spend 10 grand on a track, but you could put 10 grand into the club buying tables and chairs, so they've got that for the next big race, then guess what? They don't need to hire it. They've got that bit of infrastructure for the next race, and it makes the next race even cheaper. And then that's how a club grows and gets bigger and better, and then we've got more money to put aside to do media and make events look really good and push it out sort of to a worldwide stage, which Perth did such a good job of doing that for this nationals. We had people all around the world. I used to race with a guy called Dean Stevens in South Africa, and he was watching online and was sending through some wishes through the weekend, which is super cool. Like those guys get to see what the racing standard is in Australia and just see how far and how professional the racing scene is in Australia now.
Yeah, for sure. And I feel like out of a national title, the club, as what you sort of gone over as well, the club shouldn't have to feel like they now have to rebuild their purse, right? And I think that is probably quite a big feeling coming out of a nationals at the current moment. I actually thought the track change rule was only 25%, but I've gone back into the rules and it is 50%, which is quite a sizable change. It's virtually a tear up of majority of the track, even though it's only 50% change. You can't just get a bobcat in, and move around a bit of dirt and hope that it all sort of sticks. You end up having to turn the whole layout over and doing realistically a whole track change. So a 50% change is quite a heavy layout change. So yeah, it definitely should be looked into. And it's something that I'm sure probably will be looked into in the future. And as you mentioned, the cream does rise to the top. So I'm sure sooner or later, for a viable sort of side of things, it sort of needs to be looked into.
Yeah, I mean, go back to the data analysis, right, of the last 10 A-mains that have been run at a nationals level. They're not skewed any one way or another, right? It's the same folks, that get to the top. It takes, the good drivers, 3 or 4 tanks to wrap their head around the track, and then, they're fine-tuning from then on. This track was interesting in a way. I think we probably saw, more crashes and mistakes from the top guys on this track than we've ever seen before. There was a couple of really interesting features in it that brought everyone undone. So that was a little different in a way. But outside of that, the cream still rose to the top. Yeah.
Yeah. And we'll go through a fair bit on the track as well as we go through this as well. Other talking points. I think one of you mentioned RC Race Media, the coverage on that sort of side of things was just impeccable throughout the week. And it was world level. And I'm sure they took a lot of sort of notes from the GT Worlds they just did a couple of weeks ago and bring that to the nationals. And I'm sure, as you mentioned, you could watch back your races, but the coverage sort of side of things, I was getting messages throughout the day saying the coverage was just incredible. Anything on top of that, like you guys would like to mention it?
Well, what really highlighted to me is just the walk around in the pits and stuff. Like Tony's really got that down pat where, he can just flick a switch and walk around the pits and have an interview, and it's all synced through really well. And, if you look at a lot of the big races, even happening at the moment in Japan, is they're all just focused solely on the laps. And half the story is what's going on in the pits, and getting that driver interviews and stuff happening through the whole meet. Hats off to the guys. They're really stepping it up, I think. There's definitely some learnings that, some of the other big races can take from what Tony and them are doing, because awesome job. It's really professional, and looking forward to more content that they put out.
Yeah, I'd say their production's probably best in the world, right? If you think
Yeah.
about them being able to throw to Tony on, the mic. We've seen others try to do it with limited success from a tech perspective. Their tech, they've got their hands wrapped well around it, right? It doesn't drop out or anything. It seems to work really, really well. It's consistent. And, it brings another dimension. You get drivers that are walking straight off the stand and, Tony's in their face with a microphone asking them questions.
Straight away.
Right? That's great. Watching the 8-scale worlds, the on-road ones in the background here today while I've been working. And I got to say, Charlie and the guys do a really good job, but it's just like 13.6, 13.5, talking about lap times. There's nothing that delves into what's actually happening behind the scenes. And that's what we're all interested in, especially when you're not at the race.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And the work that they do, seeing it from my standpoint, I was working pretty much beside them for the whole weekend. So I could actually see how they would run around. And as you say, Tony would jump in the face, but also like the communication they had between each other. They had headsets on. I would be able to talk to them as well. But they would be able to talk to each other and say boxes or replay and that sort of things. And it all, they press their buttons and all that sort of stuff. And then next thing you know, you got a replay shooting up on the screen, or you got, the pit cam going. And Tony was down there in what I like to call the mosh pit, because it is a mosh pit down there, getting, fuel cam vision going and, that sort of stuff. And that is stuff that we do tend to lack in the racing, because stuff happens in pit stops, and big stuff can happen in pit stops. You get flame outs, you get, breakages, cars piling up, cars going into the cameras, and that's all the good stuff happening in the pits that, generally speaking, you don't see from large events. And they managed to cover that with, proficiency throughout the entire event. So, man, awesome coverage. And as you say as well, Ben, I think it is topping probably the best coverage in the world for RC events.
Yeah, so they've got it on lock. Matt does a great job up on the camera and then kind of producing and, putting it all together. And yeah, Tony was in our face. Like I remember Zach and I were pitting for Simon Roberts, and we did a front tire change for him when he had one come off. I think it was in the quarterfinal. And, we're trying to work out exactly how we're going to do that as quickly as possible, fuel the car. And we talked about it. We planned it. We got him in. We did it. And there's a bloody camera shoved in our face, in between us the whole time, watching what was going on. That's unreal, right? That's
I'm thinking, oh no, I'm going to cross thread this nut here and the wheel's going to come off and it's all going to be on camera.
Yeah, no, it really livens up the entire stream experience for the people that aren't there. You don't just have myself or the commentator going, all right, well, so-and-so is coming for a fuel stop and, and all right, now he's back out in there. Tony first says, I'm sorry.
He doesn't need to be sorry. We loved it. So we've been all
the
over
thing
the
that
world.
sorry, Ben, the thing that we need to probably highlight here is why we're doing it. And I guess the end game of the media is to make the racing look professional so we can attract more drivers to the scene, but also we can put that to manufacturers for sponsorship in future races. So if they see that, they're going to get good exposure and, their brand is going to be put in a professional light, then they'd be more likely to put money towards the club and the event. And that means that, there's more money going into continuing this standard, but also making sure that the club comes out ahead. And the club needs to make money. That should be the underlying, message here, that it's about making sure that the club walks away with good pool of cash so that they can make their facilities better, and which in the end makes it better for the races.
Yeah, and that's a good point as well. The sponsors quite often don't get the recognition that they should be getting for the the sponsorship that they are giving to the club.
Yeah.
And that sort of the streaming sort of side of things can really open that up. And I think we saw from the weekend that it did open it up, that the constant highlights that Tony puts up for the advertising for the event, that from the sponsors that are putting money or prizes towards, to say the raffle or that sort of side of things that you wouldn't usually get unless, you're at the track. Realistically, only the people that track all of 70 people or 80 people would get to see, and then the people at home is just blind by it. So it definitely should and likely will sort of open up the potential for better or more sponsorship come large events in the future. So and there is just a hail of comments coming in for the coverage and that sort of side of things. So they obviously did an epic job throughout the weekend, and it shows. It, like I said, I was getting messages congratulating the RC Race media crew from my messages, so they were doing an epic job. And I know Tony's watching now instead of watching the current Japan Worlds and stuff. So obviously he wanted to hear the feedback as well. So big ups Tony and also Matt. Those boys, a 2-man crew to do that sort of side of things is just an epic effort. On top of that, so I had in your dot points as well, relaxation from scrutineering to reduce the pressure on the committee. So the committee, as we mentioned, have done an epic job, superb job for the actual track, the facility, but also throughout the event, the committee guys are always on hand. The blowers and watering the track, which kept us on schedule, and also scrutineering. They did an epic job on keeping on top of everything and making sure that we were pretty much on schedule. At least for the first 2 days, we were ahead of schedule pretty much, which allowed us to have a rain delay, which was nice. But for Saturday and Sunday, we fell behind on Sunday probably by half an hour in the end, which is minimal compared to previous nationals, to say the least. So what else would you guys mention on the committee sort of side of things?
Oh, they just did a fantastic job. I think that half an hour on Sunday was only because the miss was the driver introductions, right? That was it. And it was the only reason that it fell behind. So they did a stellar job. And I think credit has to go to, RCRA and Tom Van as well, giving them the guidelines around scrutineering that, really helped take some of the pressure off what was required from the committee, from the scrutineering side, and allowed them to focus on the track, which I think is more important. Look, at the end of the day, some of the rules need to be looked at. One of the ones that always cracks me up is the fuel tank size, right? 125cc on the dot. There's absolutely no tolerance allowed at all. I was talking to the scrutineering guys when they did my tank, and they were telling me there's a few over, a few under, and it's like, yeah, well, plus or minus, it really doesn't matter about the minus, but a plus 3cc window, a tolerance would make no difference, to anyone and how we race, but it would just make that whole thing so much easier. So I think there's got to be some pragmatic thought, not even at our level, but at the IFMAR level around some of these rules. I think that one would make a really big difference. And at the end of the day, it gave the event a really good feel, right? They were able to keep things on time, which is good from our perspective, from a racer's, view. You get to go out and have dinner, right? You're not stuck at the track, till 8 or 9 o'clock at night, which quite frankly, no one really wants to be doing that. You want to have a little bit of a social side as well. I've still got nightmares from the worlds of, 10 days of being at the track till God knows what hour, and, never getting to have dinner with any of the international guys at all. So yeah, hats off to the committee and the club and RCRA. Stellar job. I wouldn't have, changed anything, a couple of tweaks here and there, but really they did a fantastic job.
Yeah, I think with the fuel gate, with the tech, I think we could probably go even one step further there and just potentially just look at, even for the main, at least the very A main, is that we just tech before the main, and then the car gets released into the pit lane, because there's nothing worse than, especially in the current situation, where you could win an Australian titles and there'd be 1cc over on the tank. I mean, come on, man. The 1cc's not got you the Australian titles. It was you driving really well. So just have them tech just the A-main cars at least before the start, release it into pit lanes, and then you're good to go. I mean, someone's not going to go and change their tank out before the main and put an extra 25cc tank in. And even if they were to go and grab a heap of fuel line and put a heap of fuel line in, it's only going to give them an extra 1 or 2 cc's anyway, which is like the length of the straight. So, yeah, maybe a slight amendment to that rule would be worthwhile, I think. And yeah, I believe the process for that would be, we do up some rules, and then you just submit it through your club, and then they go out to be voted on by all the other clubs for an amendment to the rules. So, it's probably something we need to probably look at rather than just talk about. It's just, do a couple of dot points and put in a submission and see how we go from there.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, one thing I've always wondered why they didn't do it with electric, say 10 scale. I know you guys don't compete much in that, but you do pre-scrutining or pre-tech and that sort of side of things. You check your battery, you check your wing, you check your motor, and it's all done. Like it's done for the event. They just randomly check it every now and then. It can either be like say a blue light, or just a sticker with a line through it to make sure that you haven't changed something over. I'm surprised there isn't something somewhat similar for 8 scale, and once again, not just an RCRA level, but also a world's level. I'm sure there's probably ways to get around that by bending the rules, but at the same time, I'm sure there's ways to get around it and bend the rules in 10 scale. So if it can be done in 10 scale, I'm sure it can be done in 8 scale for Nitro as well. Okay, we'll move on to the track as well. So this is probably one of the big sort of things that from the weekend, as we sort of went through, the rain leading up to the event made it obviously very difficult for the sort of crew to work with the clay and that sort of side of things. But what sort of clay were we running on? It was a sort of a red clay, or that sort of side of things. What would you consider the actual clay itself to be like?
Yeah, pretty. I guess when it's blown and watered, it's very, very high bite, and it produces a great grip when it's in that situation. But obviously, it sort of keeps self sanding, as Ben would probably call it. So you get like a groove down, which is high bite, but then you get all these small sandy particles on top, which makes it somewhat difficult to drive. And you need as we sort of learnt this weekend, you need a larger pin with a bit of spacing between the pin to sort of separate the sand and still get the pin down into the dirt. So while it looks clean, it might look clean on the video, it still can be quite a challenging surface to drive on. And tire choice is super important in that instance. And I mean, I wish we were starting the IFMAR Worlds now after what we know. Because for sure we got the car really good at this event, and we chose the right tires, unlike the Worlds. And the surface, I would say, was pretty close to the Worlds. If you go back and look at the World Championships, the surface had a pretty good line. I would say by the end of the main, the line was very small, but at the start it was similar to what our A main was. So we probably had a slightly cleaner surface than the Worlds and a little bit more of a line, but in saying that, by the end of the main, the line was probably only a car width and a bit wide to be really fast. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. Natural dirt, it sort of brings its own intricacies, but I had a great time. And now that we got the car and the tires for that surface, I'd be certainly more than happy to go back and race on it again.
Yeah, I think it was awesome, right? At the end of the day, natural surface is, generally amazing. Biggest challenge with all of them is always keeping the amount of moisture into it, right? In a perfect world, and look, I lived in Singapore for 11 years and raced in Malaysia a lot. And, what I learned up there was if you get rain and good rain, on like a Wednesday or a Thursday, before a large race meeting, you're guaranteed an amazing track. And we've seen that at Perth before for FEMCA events and things like that, albeit the rain was during the event. It's just so hard with watering to keep enough rain deep enough, or enough water, deep enough into the dirt. You really need rain to play its part. But the crew did an awesome job. There was plenty of self-sanding, that track produces itself, sort of 10 or 20 minutes into, the final, you could feel that. It just requires a lot of real precision driving and the right tire choice. I think as Zach said, we had, I don't know how many runs we have at the Worlds, maybe 18 runs. I didn't choose the right tire once. Like I left the Worlds thinking, wow, that was brutal. Whereas, every run over the Nationals, I managed to be on the right tire for each one. So I made a couple of big gambles, like for the semi-final, the choice of rubber there, given how early that we ran on. Made the right calls. Track was good. Was good fun. I have nothing but great things to say about the surface there from a natural surface perspective. I think it would only get better. Like if it had rained Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and we started off on like a bit of a damp track, the grip would have gone through the roof, and maybe it doesn't sand as, sort of self-sand as much.
What tires were you on, Ben? You want to just touch on, I guess, what your strategy was through the weekend?
So my strategy was exactly the opposite of what I did at the Worlds, right? the Worlds, I tried to choose what I thought was the right tire for each run, or quite frankly, probably look too much at what others were doing rather than use my own experience. It's a mistake I've made at multiple Worlds. If I ever do a Worlds again, I'm not doing it. I'm not looking at anyone. I'm just going to do what I do, which is what I did this weekend. So, you know, I took a limited set of tires with me. So J Concepts Reflex. I took some relapse on the off chance that it would rain and come up with a mega clean groove. And then I took a couple of finals tires, you know, with blockers. And my whole strategy was stay on the same tire the whole time. And at least that way, out of, you know, the 8 or 9 runs that I'll get at the Nationals, you know, my percentage of being on the right tire will go up. What we saw was a lot of our runs and where I seeded into was early in the morning, and it was wet. They were watering the track. I was in an early morning run for 2 lots of mornings in a row where they watered. So Super Soft Reflex for me was my choice of tire for the majority of the morning runs, moving to a soft one in the afternoon. And then the big gamble was, you know, what do we do for a 30-minute semi-final? Zach and I were both in the first semi of the day. So that was like 9 or 9:15 in the morning. They watered, half the track was shaded. I went out and felt the track with my hand and it was like ice cold under all the shaded bits. So I decided to run a super soft tire, which is not what I'd normally run on a natural groove for a 30-minute run. But I had experience in one of the other qualifiers where I ran a soft tire on a watered track and it was just Disney on ice. I had no grip at all. So I took that learnings, plugged that into the memory bank, went out on a super soft, had grip from lap 1, and the tires lasted the 30 minutes. So that worked out really well and bumped straight into the main. So I don't think I would have got straight into the main had I not made that tire choice. If I went out on softs, I just would have lost touch in the first 5 minutes and it would have been game over.
And then the finals, you ran like an A2 blocker, which is like similar to a fugitive.
Yeah, so the finals, you know, we learned from the dry qualifiers that a soft reflex is probably going to do 30 minutes in a dry condition, which is what we had for the final. You know, we were on it probably 2 o'clock in the afternoon, so the track was going to dry pretty quickly from the water that they had. So I brought with me a couple of sets of A2 aqua blockers, which is a slightly larger pin than a reflex. Suppose, yeah, it looks a little bit like a fugitive in terms of pin dimensions, and went out on that. And I was pretty stoked from lap 1 of the warm-up. I was like, ooh, this is a really good tire. I'm happy with how it feels. I had the best car speed that I'd had all weekend. So there's probably an argument that I should have been on that harder compound for some of the other dry runs that I had. That might have been a little better. The car was faster on that tire. And I ran that for the whole main, and that lasted 60 minutes and still had tread on it when I came off. And Alex ran an A2 as well. And, you know, he was very, very similar to me in terms of what he had. He ran a Stalker, which is, I think, 160 less pins on it, but it's still very tightly packed. And he had plenty of rubber come the end of the main. So, yeah, it was a successful event in terms of picking the right tire, which was good after how I left the Worlds, which was a fairly ordinary tire selection event.
Yeah, I gotta admit, I was expecting to see literally every car come off with slick tires on at the end. So I was surprised to see, as you mentioned there, like Alex's tires and quite a fair few other people's tires that came off still with like 60 to 70% tread left on the actual tire and giving off incredible amount of grip. Like Alex was still punching out 33-second laps towards the end of the race after 60 minutes of running. So obviously the tire choice was at a premium there and managed it real well.
He was flying. We talked a lot about it on Saturday night. You know, what would we run for the final? What did we think? Temperature of the track, how much was it going to get in terms of water? And then what we did as well to get some more data was we watched again the World's main, right? And one of the things that Mayfield did was he ran a detox in that main. And, you know, I think the self-sanding of the track probably, you know, worked against him once he got to the 25 or 30-minute mark. He led a lot of that main, you know, and everyone remembers Ongaro winning, but, you know, Mayfield was in the driver's seat for a big part of that. And I think the car just went away from him as the track self-sanded. And, you know, then we saw what happened with Ongaro, right? He was on a pin tire and he was able to get past him and just continue to forge ahead. So we took that into consideration, and we thought it was going to be pretty similar, and was spot on.
Yeah, very interesting. Wet track versus dry track. Did you find what was your sort of findings with it? Tire choice when it came to those sort of things.
Time of day was the biggest thing. So
Yeah.
the wet track in the morning was almost a waste of time from a qualifying perspective. I seeded into the second last heat, and I had 2 wet tracks in the morning, and that was really challenging. The lap times were slow. There's nothing you can do about it out there on super softs, and the faster heat was generally faster because the track was drier. Once we moved through to mid-morning, it was fine. The track had a little bit of temperature in it. The water dried a little bit faster, and it wasn't so critical. But those early morning runs, it really made a big difference.
Right. No, it's interesting that the actual temperature of the track drops so much, and we'll go through a little bit later on the moments that I sort of had when it came to the weather. But there was very, very cold weather in the morning. Like, we were turning up to the track, and it was probably 12 degrees at most, I would say, in some, or especially Saturday, Sunday mornings, which came as a big surprise to me. But yeah, the track temperature, as you mentioned, would have been literally ice cold. So the group giving off later in the afternoon from the sun baking into it would have obviously been a lot higher come, after, say, 10 o'clock. But yeah, it's interesting how the group sort of evolved throughout the morning / into the midday sort of times.
Yeah, I think that's probably the only miss that they've got to tweak for next year, just so that's a little more even in terms of who's hitting the track first up. It was always sort of race 1 through to however many we had. I think was it 8 or 9 in a round? They need to stagger that, right? It's not equal when the same heats are hitting the early morning track with water, and that's especially apparent when you have a naturally grooved track or a natural track where you are watering and blowing. That's probably got to be cycled through where, one round heat 4 starts, and then the next round heat 6 starts, and it just needs to cycle through a little bit more to even that out. But that's just the only, one of the learnings that I think RCRA can pick up from for next year.
Yeah, for sure.
I think that's important. I think that's important, Ben. We like every rule book or event organization is going to take learnings out of it. That's not to say that they've done something majorly wrong. It's just we're going to learn stuff as we go along, and that's a perfect opportunity right there to just learn. Okay, we need to put something in there about staggering the heats. It's a simple one, and there's probably another couple of learnings that we can take from the meeting, but might as well document them now so we can make the events even more enjoyable for everyone going forward.
Yeah, the last thing you want to be doing for, say, even the new up and coming guys or the people that are sort of still learning the hobby, that sort of thing, is give them a disadvantage straight off the bat by going, all right, well, you have the crap track. Good luck. It doesn't feel fun for that sort of side of things when you literally have, you probably don't have a massive chance of making the A or anything like that in the best part of time, but to give them even less chance of having a decent run by giving them a track that's naturally 2 seconds a lap slower than what the guys in an hour's time on a sun-baked track will be. It definitely doesn't feel great from a race.
No, we need to make it even for everyone as much as we possibly can, for sure.
Yeah,
that's an easy one to address, right? Just a small oversight, really simple to fix for next time. And look, at the end of the day, we should be starting out with truggies if they're even there next year anymore.
Yeah.
There you go.
Right, let them get out there and break the track.
Yeah, no, it's a valid point.
For.
And especially considering there was only a single heat of them, it's not a disadvantage to the later heats of truggies if there is only a single heat of truggies.
Trucks moving forward, we'll have to wait and see on that one, eh?
Yeah, well, that's a good point to bring up. The lack of truggies. We saw decent numbers of truggies from the Sunny Coast Nationals as of 12 months before, and we saw even a quite a sizable amount of e-truggies at that event. What do you guys think that is bringing on this lack of truggy racing at the moment?
No, personally, I think it's just the cost, mate. You look at the cost of a set of tires, and it's pretty crazy. I can't believe people would even consider paying that, unfortunately. And if this tire price keeps trending in the direction that it is, especially on a natural surface track, that does make things a little bit more difficult with a natural track. You don't really know what pin's going to work, what compound's going to work. So if you have a look at, to be competitive, you probably need to take 4 or 5 different styles of pin design, and then probably 2 or 3 different compounds in that. And so it's quickly adding up to be, $1,000, $1,500 worth of rubber, opposed to like a treated surface where there's a pretty clear tire that's working, and you can take just a couple of sets of the one set style of tire. But I think for the truggy, I would say that it's probably the cost, and 8-scale EP is really coming in pretty strong now. So if you're looking at from a cost perspective and you're going away racing, and you only need to really take 8-scale buggy tires, and you can use it also on your nitro buggy, because probably what would be interesting is how many people are racing nitro truggy that are also racing nitro buggy. And I would probably say, it's 50 to 75%. There probably wouldn't be many that are just running the nitro truggy as a single class. They're using it as additional track time. And so if you're looking at the cost, you'd probably go, I'll run EP buggy and nitro buggy because I can, take all the same spares. I've got the same tires. And then, obviously that does make the racing a little bit more expensive if you want to be super competitive. Obviously, Ben and I just raced one class, but there's quite a lot of the top drivers that are racing 2 classes, which means they get more information to test tires and work out what's happening with the track development while we're running a single class. So running multiple classes, obviously very beneficial for the club, which is important. But can be a bit difficult for cost management. And I think that's probably why we're seeing truggies start to fall and EP buggies building.
Yeah, I think it's exactly right, Zach. It's got to do with the cost of it. I think the class, if you're going to run a second class that makes sense, is EP buggy. Same tires, you get a feel for it, use it as a test for your nitro buggy. I think truggy's hopefully dead. We don't need it at a nationals level if there's 10 or 12 cars. The entries speak volumes. It's not really relevant.
Do you guys know why there hasn't actually been a Truggy Worlds? And do you think if there was a Truggy Worlds, would it boost numbers?
Because Europe is not interested in truggy, right? That's only North America. I don't think anyone in Europe really cares about truggy at all. From what I've seen historically, it's a very North American centric class, and that's why.
Yep, totally.
Right. Okay. And I think a lot of the reason, or personally, a bit of the reason at least, is because, in my opinion, truggy has gone away from being a truggy. We used to have the truggy bodies, used to have a car that actually felt more like a truck than it did a buggy, whereas nowadays it's just a buggy with longer arms. Realistically, it handles more and more like a buggy every time they bring out a car. It doesn't seem like its own sort of class now. It's just a different version of the same thing. And something to spend even more money on. Let's see.
Yeah, and the manufacturers aren't going to want another class to do the worlds at. Even if you look at the EP worlds, they were going to try and host a pre-worlds to see if it would work. And the amount of money that a company needs to spend to send all their pro drivers, that's probably the main reason why the 8-scale worlds is only every 2 years, because it's just so expensive to send all their drivers and support our world championships at the level that they need to if they want to try and win. So if you were to add in a 8-scale truggy worlds and it was at a separate location to the 8-scale worlds, that would be a pretty huge cost that the manufacturers just wouldn't support, because they're probably not likely to recoup the benefit. At least with the 8-scale buggy nitro side of things, it's obviously the biggest class across the world. So If something wins at a world championships, then there's going to be lots of people in Europe, for instance, that are going to buy that buggy because it's won the worlds and it's, if it has a clear advantage. But because it's not supported worldwide, then manufacturers are probably going to be pretty reluctant, I think, to invest what they need to have a world championships.
Yeah, it's spot on. It'd be interesting to know if Mars done a good job. I don't know whether it was by design many, many years ago with having worlds every 2 years. But if you think about it, and Zach touched a little bit on it, then manufacturers have to recoup the investment. So if you have a development of a car and then you win, you get a couple of years to sell that, versus if you had a worlds every year, you would have a whole lot less time to be able to monetize that investment. So I think, it works out well having it every 2 years. There's no way you could do it every year. Our hobby's way too small for that. And then you've got the same drivers traveling to the same races anyway. So I think it works out well. Truggy and EP, clearly just too small at the moment. What will be interesting to see moving forward is, do things change in terms of nitro buggy and it moves towards, e-buggy with the whole, movement towards green? I hope not. But let's wait and see in the future years. There's just not the excitement watching the e-buggies go around that there is with nitro buggies.
It's much easier to race cool, I gotta admit, than the e-buggies. You don't have to yell as loud over the noise of the nitro motor, so it's a benefit for myself.
If we can work out how to do battery changes so they can run for an hour, then I'd be interested.
Yeah,
I'll probably only start warming up until like 10 minutes into a run. So I really need those long mains to be able to actually get a good result. Otherwise, I'll just be floundering around out the back after 10 minutes and I'm ready to go, and then the race ends. So
I'm sure quick change batteries for e-buggies could be a thing. I'll talk to Associated.
Thanks.
Yeah. I'll go back to the track. Actually, there's another talking point I sort of wanted to mention for the actual track itself, and one thing the committee sort of put into the track, and I'm sure with help as well from is it Lawton who helped build the track? I always forget.
Yeah.
The different racing lines. There was actually quite a fair few sections that had choice of different racing lines. The most obvious one being the one on the left-hand side of the track that sort of went up the hill, had a berm section to the inside that had a sort of a mogul on it, or you could choose the outside lane, had either an off-camber sort of section if you ran the tight line, or sort of a flat section into a single, which you could just manipulate into a double if you hit a clean line. What do you guys think about that sort of side of things first of all on a racetrack, and actually how did they set it out onto their track?
It was absolute chaos. So the Martin back, as we called it, because it was Hunter's idea. Look, I mean, it made that part of the track unpredictable and interesting at the same time. It all depended on how you attacked it, right? If you went in there really hard and you tried to jump those moguls, they bit everyone. They bit Alex, they bit Caleb Noble, they bit Kyle. Every single person crashed there more than any time I've ever seen the top guys crash anywhere in the world, right? So it was a section that was, I think unpredictable. You could get through there, but you would lose time, right? I would take a relatively safe line through there. I'd be tight through Martin's back and then kind of just give it a little squirt and, roll through the moguls. For sure, I lost probably 3/4 of a second in that section alone, maybe more compared to how Alex was attacking it. But, I figured if I could not get marshaled there as much as others, that would be helpful from a consistency perspective. I didn't love it, quite frankly. I would prefer a track that has flow to it, corner to corner. I really enjoy layouts like that rather than that sort of unpredictability side of it. But that was my feeling with it.
And Zach?
Probably pretty consistent with what Ben said there. My preference is certainly a track where you've got predictable jump sections. If you are going to have something like that, I think maybe needed to slow the car down a little bit more leading into it. So like maybe you would have that out of a corner rather than like a 90-degree, because the outside line was very fast. So because you're carrying so much speed and like leading up into it was a bit inconsistent, and there wasn't really a jump there. And talking with Martin afterwards, he said it wasn't really meant to be a jump. It was supposed to be more like a mogul section. But in the end, it was being used as a jump because everyone was just like, especially on the outside line, if you would send it, you could sort of jump the other blob of dirt and get into the corner, and it was pretty quick. But obviously the line was about a car width. So when you've got something that's probably a little bit inconsistent and it's designed to be inconsistent, then you've got to slow the car down. Otherwise it could, the event of failing is that the car goes cartwheeling, and we certainly saw that a fair bit. And that, considering the conditions that they had when they built the track, they did a pretty good job. But yeah, I think that section was definitely the trickiest section that I've had to drive through on a track for a fair while. And I ended up finding the inside line was probably the most consistent. There was a pretty smooth line leading up, and there really only one single out of it. So you could sort of drive just right of the sort of blob that they had there, and then there was a single leading into the corner. But yeah, that rope, man, you touch that rope and it's like a vacuum. It just sucks you in, So
there was so many cars that caught out by a rope.
Yeah, and like we've got rope, but our rope's probably half the diameter. So, this rope is like the perfect diameter. So if you get on it, your car is full turtle and it's just sitting on there, and you can't even get the wheels on the ground. So yeah, you really lost time if you got on the rope. And as Simon Roberts probably knows, I'm a pretty big fan of curbs. Every time I go to Maitland, I would whinge that they didn't have concrete curbs. And maybe if they had a concrete curb in that in the Martin back, right in that berm, I'd probably bet that everyone would go the inside line, because it would be a lot less of a risk, because if you were to touch the curb, you're up on concrete, it would be fine. And that's all part of it. That's part of racing. It's like if you're running a street circuit, you don't want to hit the wall, because if you hit the wall in a real car, it's game over, unless you're in a supercar or something. V8 supercars, maybe they can rub the wall a bit, but adds the dynamic. But yeah, I'm a pretty big fan of concrete curves, because you can get a bit closer, and it's not really ending your run as much as probably what this was. But yeah, a bit of an interesting section. But
yeah,
I think
that's
my thoughts.
Right? It was an interesting section. The way it was put together, you really just had to think about, right, what's my approach going to be? Right, and you had to make a smart decision, or it would bring you undone. If you jump into the inside line aggressively, if you got that wrong by 20 or 30 mil, you touch the rope, you're screwed. It spins you around, and then the challenge that you had was, the next person was just jumping into the same place, and they were collecting you. So, that for me was the part that was probably the most challenge, is make the right decision. Was there someone that was, if you were going in there, was you right behind someone? And because the thought in the back of your head was, well, if they screw it up, you got nowhere to go. It made me think, not good or bad in terms of a section, just probably not one that I would think fondly of, in memories over the years, versus some of the other sections on other tracks over the world that I've fallen in love with. That is definitely not one of them.
Yeah, and from a stream and race calling standpoint, it was epic. Like, it was awesome to see cars, go what looked to be side by side, and quite often it was side by side going up their hill, because the berm created that inside line, and one person would go to the outside, whether it be front or behind. The car from behind would just gas it up around the outside. From a racing sort of viewership standpoint, was awesome. And I'm a massive fan of split sections, and that was just a different way of doing it. I think one thing that the Sunny Coast crew did extremely well on their track for the previous Nationals is they had a berm corner into a dual tabletop, where if you hit the berm, you could gas it up hard and you actually clean the second tabletop. You could either land on the tabletop or the down ramp if you hit it hard enough. Whereas these guys, if you went in the inside line, you could go tabletop, and there was very minimal time loss between the two. Whereas these guys have taken it to a different sort of side, where it has that sort of berm corner. You can choose the inside lane or outside lane. And as you mentioned as well, if the car in front of you does crash, it really leaves you with one option. If you've committed to the inside lane, which we saw a couple of times, even with leaders, the two cars in front of you would crash and you end up in the dog pile, and the marshal's running over to marshal 2, 3, 4 cars all in one go because they've all just piled into the same corner, which the racing width of that sort of line was all of, a car and a half wide. So it definitely created a bit of a different feel to that sort of section of the track. And, it would have been interesting to see how the track would have been if the sort of inside berm wasn't there at all. Just have the mogul on the single on the outside and the single on the inside, and seeing what the racing would have been like on that sort of side of things as well. It still would have created different racing lines, but just in a different way, I'd say.
Yeah.
The double onto the straight, what do you guys think of that? I know that caught a lot of people out over the weekend as well, and I had a lot of people saying, I hate that double. It's a pain, but at the same time, it seemed like a lot of people were just sort of taking it easy and getting the non-racing lines going into a nice and easy and cleaning it every time. What were your guys' thoughts? You wanted to hit it quick, but sort of unstable the car, that sort of side?
For me, I think it was probably more to do with perspective for that jump. The Perth driver stand's not exactly super high, so it's just really hard on that. Like, you've got a difficult section and it's a long way away, and you can't really see exactly where your car is positioned, whether it's in the middle of the track or if it's on the outside, because just naturally from your perspective, you're seeing two ropes that are relatively close together because you're just not high enough, and that's where having a difficult section at the furthest part of the way of the track. We do that a lot in Australian racing. We have difficult sections on the far part and we have our straight, the easiest part, right close to us. So, there's probably something to consider there. For sure, I didn't really like that double, but what we sort of found is, you could make it easier by going into the step up section on the very outside. And then your car was in the right position and you just had to hit it flat stick really and give the wheel a bit of a wiggle. So you're doing a whip in the air and then you're onto the straight. And I don't think I crashed there in the final. So it was doable, but man, it took a fair while to learn that jump section for sure. That was, the three sections that were hard on the track was the left-hand side, that double, and then the crow's foot on the very front section. And I would probably, in order of difficulty, would be the left-hand side, the double, and then the crow's foot. Like, I could pretty much deal with the crow's foot, but those two other sections were definitely the hardest.
Yeah, has a small double ever caused so many marshalling events as that double? And everyone at home's probably watching that video and thinking, what's going on? Why is everyone crashing? That's the easiest jump in the world. And that jump just brought everyone undone. And everyone crashed there. Whether it was, the guys, even truggies were crashing there. Getting the run up to it was critical, right? If you over jump that step up, that was the problem. You get that right, then you're okay. But it just took a lot of laps to lock into it. And I'm, second what Zach says. If you look at the way Joey and the guys in the US typically build their tracks, the straights and the more technical sections are inverse to where we have them, right? We put straights right in front of us and we put the hard sections the furthest part away. So something to definitely consider with the track builders. But in saying that, it was, I think you knew going into there that people would make mistakes. So if you were able to find a line that you could work there and get through there consistently and, manage to do that in the semi and not crash there at all, it was really beneficial because plenty of others made mistakes there constantly.
Yeah, and that was all the way through the field. That wasn't just the sort of bottom 50 drivers. That was all the way to the top. We saw Caleb, Alex, top drivers making errors there, even into the finals. Even if it was small things, I'd touch the lip on the inside wheel or something like that, which is unsettle the car. Next thing you know, they're facing the wrong way on the straight. It would just seem to just have that little throw off that caused a 2 to 3 second time extra onto your lap, which can cost you in the long run, especially come to qualifying.
And it's hard you want to make a track that is obviously challenging for the top drivers, but then somewhat drivable for the less experienced or skilled drivers. It's a fine balance, and no track driver has been able to get that perfect balance. And I think all in all, the track was really good. I enjoyed the layout. So whoever's listening online, don't take it as that we're just criticizing the track, because it's certainly not the case. There was just a couple of sections that were probably more difficult than what we're used to, I suppose.
Yeah. Before we move forward, we've just had the finalized results from the IFMA GP Worlds, and Jesse Davies had a blinder of a run, and also Jeff Hammond. They ended up 4th and 5th for the final run.
Wow, that's
so that
what I'm
is
talking about.
absolutely on pace. So they both end up on 18 lappers, low 18 laps, so 18.408 for Jesse and 18.409 for Jeff Hammond.
Yeah,
So
Awesome,
that'll
boys.
bump them right on up.
Jesse was on a P2 in that second last round of qualifying. He was looking like he was going to go 406 or 407, and was flying and ran out of fuel, which was obviously gutting. So I'm glad he's backed that up and had an awesome run there. And yeah, just been pretty solid. Probably not the pace yet that he's wanted, but he started to show up now, which is awesome. So good consistency from him.
Yeah, so the overall results.
And the
are
406 there, what have you got? Yeah.
Let's see. Qual points. Oh, they've got it as best 3 of 6. So I haven't actually
really?
have some reason, unless they'd run it differently of
Maybe,
GP
yeah.
racing. Simon, I'm not going to pronounce names because I've had enough of pronouncing names after last week. Dario in 2, Tony Gruber up in P3, good run. Kuki Kato up in P4, so he was also one of the 10 scale off-road drivers that had a good run. Shoki in 5, Yuya in 6. Let's see, Jesse Davies in 8th, and Jeff Hammond rounding out the top 10. So they'll be in the Super Pole. I'm pretty certain that they do the Super Pole for the 1/8 GP.
How's Kuki Kato? The guy's never driven an 8 scale GP car.
Right.
Are you serious?
A month. It's the second time he's ever raced it. He went out to the track like a month or 2 ago and did like a club race, and then he turns up to the Worlds.
10 scale off-road experience. That's all I'm saying.
He's doing it on Garo. Just build a buggy in the hotel and put all the stock screws in it and drive it, mate.
Yeah. So Tony Firth actually said 3 of 6 is correct. So there you go.
Oh, there you go.
And also a bit more info from Tony. Super Pole is for P2.
Oh,
3.
really?
Oh, okay, so it's not full top 10. So
yeah, they got that really good rule. But if you TQ, I'm a big fan of this because I think it's so mean. It means qualifying means something. TQ goes straight to the main, which is awesome.
Yeah, and Super Pole, winner of Super Pole also then goes on through as well.
Yeah,
which is cool.
I think that's awesome.
No, that's epic. Actually, we're hoping as long as Jeff gets home or does whatever he needs to do in time, that I might end up having a chat with Jeff afterwards as well. So keep a keen eye out for that. But yeah, so epic results from those Aussie boys. I know there is a fair few other Aussies over there as well. Can't think of many off the top of my head. I think we have a team of about 8 to 10 drivers over there. I'm sure Tony will probably jump on in. Luke Duthie as well from New Zealand. He's had a pretty good run. He's in 32nd overall, 3 of 6.
Nice.
He's a real good fella from over in Kiwiland. But yeah, so we have a fairly strong contingency over there for this event once again. Back onto our side of things, bring up the talking points once again. Pizzagate. Okay, let's have a chat about Pizzagate. Let's have a laugh. So Pizzagate happened. It most certainly happened. So everyone there, and this is no fault to the committee. The committee ended up being virtually the middleman in this whole situation. I feel really bad for the committee, and I almost feel bad for talking about it, but it was probably one of the funniest things I've seen at national titles for a fair while, mainly because of the guys serving the pizza was just a proper laugh. Everyone was sold that $30 you get all you can eat pizza, right? And everyone sort of thought, sweet, $30 for all you can eat pizza. That is a good time, a good night of the track. And so I think ended up being about 55 drivers, ended up going for the pizza night. Old mate rocks up in his fire truck that he's kitted out a gas stove and stuff into, which was pretty cool as well.
Yeah, awesome setup.
Yeah, like epic setup. And then all of a sudden, about 40 people, I'd say. I walked down there at one stage and saw a crowd of looked like vultures just hoarding around this pizza guy trying to get themselves a slice of pizza. So I thought I'd turn back up a little bit later and grab another pizza later on. I later found out that there wasn't enough pizzas and I probably should go down and grab myself one. So Zach or Ben, explain what went on with Pizzagate.
Well, Ben and I had finished our runs and we were, walking down and we're just like, well, I might as well check out the pizza van. Like he was supposed to have started like 5 minutes ago. So we go down, have a bit of a yarn to him. He seemed pretty happy at this stage. He was like, yeah, sweet. Like, yeah, gonna cook some pizzas, happy days. And we're like, righto, mate, fire up your oven. Like, when are you starting cooking? And he's like, oh, I can start whenever you want. And I'm like, Ben and I are looking around like no one else is lined up. Let's go. Like, I'm ready for all you eat pizza. And that's what everyone thought it was. And then, so we got like first serve. I think me and Jacob Wilson were there. We're just hoeing in. I think we all had like one pizza each and, starting to enjoy the pizzas coming through. And old mate was starting to get a little bit frustrated. He started yelling at his little supporter there because she wasn't cutting the pizza properly. And he showed her like 4 or 5 times how to cut the pizza, and it's starting to get a little bit angry. So I think that sort of got us a bit of a glimpse of the anger in the little Italian man. And then the line started getting a bit bigger and people started realizing that the pizza was on, and he'd cook like, I don't know, 6 or 8 pizzas in one go. And he's dropping the pizza down and obviously RC racers have been breathing in nitro all day. They're getting hungry. So like this poor girl's trying to cut the pizza and everyone's trying to get a piece like before she'd even cut it. And so he's yelling at the people lining up, wait for her to cut the pizza before you take the pizza.
He wasn't that polite. It was more like, hey, you animals, stop.
Yeah, you animals.
That's it. I mean, if anyone's seen the Seinfeld Soup Nazi episode, that was this guy. He was dead set to Soup Nazi. If you've not seen it, really funny Seinfeld episode. This bloke was the same, passionate about his pizzas. And Zach and I did have a little bit of pizza, and then we went away and we did a track walk for everyone, and we came back and there was people everywhere, and he was under the pump, and he was getting the pizzas out, which was great. And then he hit like 52 pizzas or whatever his limit was, and he pulled stumps. And that wasn't a happy conversation with him at that point. He was getting needled by everyone to keep making them. And there was obviously a misalignment of what all you can eat actually meant.
Yeah, I definitely think the 1.5 pizza sort of side of things wasn't quite on. Like that didn't seem to be communicated correctly to them, or I don't know what happened, but it definitely seemed like there was a substantial amount of people. When I came down later on because once again, I saw a line of people and I wasn't walking over and waiting half an hour for a slice of pizza. I'd rather sit down and wait for everyone to clear out. I walked through at one point where everyone was going, all right, well, get your one slice whilst you still can, because there ain't not much coming out.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, okay, that sounds like a bit of a problem. I ended up walking down probably about 2 hours after he'd started cooking, and I didn't realize what had gone on by this stage with the argument with the amount of pizzas and that sort of side of things. And I tried to have a general conversation with him, and I'd sort of said, oh, how's it going? Have you got a couple of pizzas coming out? And he went ballistic. He started going off, oh, you haven't paid enough money. And I was going, whoa, man, like, I have nothing to do with this. I was just asking, is there more pizzas coming? I just want a piece of pizza and I will be happy. Like, I will get out of your face. And so I walked back upstairs just about with my arms raised, feeling like I'd just been crucified by this pizza guy that apparently we didn't pay enough for enough pizzas or something like that. And yeah, I came back down about an hour, well, not an hour, probably about 20 minutes later for him to be literally violently cutting through the pieces. I've never seen someone violently cut a pizza before, but this man was just hammering through the pizzas as fast as he could just to get them into these boxes. And then he literally just chucked them on the table and went, no more, I'm done. And packed his crap and just buggered off out of there. It was probably one of the funniest things I've seen in a while. And the last like 10 pizzas were pretty much all pineapple and ham, which are just it's just awful. And they were burnt to a crisp as well. So I think it was a bit of a fuck you send off. And he was out.
Yeah, but like I think it was a great idea. Like, well done to the club.
Yeah,
you
great
know?
idea. Yeah,
It was
they really
cool,
thought about that.
right? Good social thing. We need to do more of that, right? Bring people together, have a
100%.
chat. You know, you're quite focused during the day working on your gear, and you don't get to talk to everyone that you want to. So I think it was awesome. You know, we just need to find someone that'll do unlimited pizza because we'd probably still be sitting there now eating if it was, to be fair.
Yeah, we found like an outside line, like there was a table, and then Ben and I sort of got around the side. Jacob had sort of shown us the line, and you know, there was a line up at the front of the table, but we were just coming in from the side, and so like for sure we had the line for the pizza, and I think we probably ended up having like 2 or 3 pizzas ourselves. So I apologize to anyone who missed out on a pizza, but I pretty much had my full. So.
Yeah, it was definitely good. Jacob, the Cup Wilson, he found a line that worked very well for us, just pitching up the side of the table there and waiting till the pizza came out. And yeah, it worked good.
Well, he ended up putting a bin because people had seen the line and were trying to get behind the table to grab the pizza. And he's like, no, you're not allowed here. You're not allowed here. And put like a barrier up. So, yeah, angry little man.
Yeah, proper vulture spec. Yeah. Pineapple pizza, no go. Exactly. That's what I think at least. All right. Surprise drivers out of the event. Who sort of surprised you both the most coming out of the event?
Well, probably just the young guys, really. Again, Zach Foster's really been improving a lot lately. He had an awesome race, mate. To see him getting up there, he's going to be someone to keep an eye on in the future. Probably Christian Mulhutter again. He seems to be improving every race that he goes to, and I think he's firmly demonstrated that he's probably top 5 in Australia now, without a doubt. And his long runs are probably where he shines. Certainly, from what I saw in Manila earlier this year with ABC, you know, he come through at the end of the main there and was really, really strong. And then again for this race, he had a bad start, and he just put the hammer down and was really consistent. So excited to see, I guess, where those two guys progress to. Bit of bad luck for Cooper Nitschke in the LCQ. He sort of was there and then got caught up on some of the rope, and that sort of probably lost his opportunity to make it to the final. But he was certainly in the hunt. But yeah, I mean, if you look at all the age of the A main, I would say it's pretty skewed to the young fellas. And me and Ben and Craig are probably the old hats in the final now. So yeah, the next generation's definitely coming through, and it's really, really good to see. And just the pace in the final these days, you couldn't really lift off for an hour. Hey, like it was almost like 6 qualifiers. You had to keep pushing super hard, otherwise, you know, people were just catching you. So, hats off to the young guys.
Yeah, they did awesome. You know, Zach Foster just killed it, and he won his junior national title, which is great. You know, Harry Sims drove really well. I think Brady Piggott really impressed. You know, local, so
Yeah.
he laps, but he did really, really well. Showed amazing pace in e-bucky as well, man. He had that thing on a dime. Looked really, really good. You know, he made the main. And then, you know, for me, the other person that really impressed was Aaron Dexter. You know, Big A, he killed it. He was driving really, really well with a new TLR car that he's not had for that long. So I thought he was super impressive. So pretty healthy outlook for Australian nitro buggy racing.
Whoop. I want to do that again. We've actually got Jeff on the not far off. I'll see if we can add him into this. See how we go. This could be absolutely horrible if this doesn't work. Let's see. No, we're gonna have to go
back in his hotel. He's probably stuck in some corner of the room because the hotels in Japan are not big. So let's see where he is if you get him in.
Yeah. Let's see if we go camera slot. Oh, that's not great. I might have to do one of these. I'll edit myself so I'm nice and small. So coming in live from Japan. Actually, you know what? I'll just go into the background. Mr. Jeff Hammond, how's it going, mate?
Hey guys. Good to see you all.
How
Oh,
are
it
you,
would
mate?
be good to see you.
Looks
My
like you had
internet's
a.
pretty shit, so sorry.
That's all right. It's like tuning in straight from Japan, and absolute blinder in the last one, mate. What did you change in your car, or did you just perform to your absolute best in that last one, mate?
No, the performance was actually a little bit shit with consistency, but we changed engine and put in the finals motor. So I've been saving it this whole time. And yeah, we got a good set of tires and I put a run together. So it was pretty good.
Yeah, epic. How's the track and facilities and all that side of things for our Worlds?
Yeah, pretty wild. The track's really unique. There's a lot of elevation change and super fast lap time. So we're doing like 13s. Really hard on motors because we're doing 4-minute runs with no stops. So everyone's barely doing 4 minutes. Facilities are as you would expect from Infinity. Everything's, no money spared. They've got a really great hobby shop, good cafe. They sell beer. So there's nothing to really complain about.
I'm just trying to get you into the frame. I'm not sure if we can actually see at the moment. See how that.
Yeah,
goes.
no, we can't see him just yet.
So, Jeff, Ben,
Invisible. There he is.
There
There
we
he is.
go.
How are
There
you,
we
mate?
go.
now we can see. It looks like, geez, you've got some sun, buddy. Look at that, hey?
Yeah. It's pretty brutal in the pits. It's you don't have too much shade. I don't know if I can change the camera, but you can see the pits behind me there. There's not a great deal of shade
So
in the morning sun.
Give the viewers a little bit of an idea. You went to your finals engine. Obviously, better power out of that. What did it do in terms of lap times? What were you able to extract from that engine that you didn't have with your other qualifying engine?
Well, it's kind of weird. I actually did my PB lap time for the whole week. So this whole time I've been trying to do, the fastest lap. But funnily enough, the motor makes so much difference in terms of how the car handles with these things. So when you've got a really strong motor, like bottom end and mid power, you can really utilize it to, hold the corner speed and make the car turn, which this track, it's all about power and steering, like I guess any 8 scale, but this track probably more so. So yeah, the new motor, just more power, the same sort of top speed, and just made the car handle actually better as well. So I was able to, get in the groove with that. But yeah, I dropped a good 10th on my fastest lap. So yeah, I'm pretty pumped with that because a 10th around this track is like near impossible.
And that engine that you've got, Jeff, is that going to be like that good all the way through to the end of the finals now? Like, or have you only got like 2 liters where it's in its sweet spot, or are you confident that like if you're using it early, did you have to do that for your qualifying position and you've sacrificed up some engine, or?
So I sacrificed a few engines to try to dial them in terms of head clearance, venturi sizes, pipes, early on in practice. And coming over, I think I had 5 engines. We went through 3. I saved 1 for quali, and then I borrowed 1 from Max Power himself. So I'm hoping I did get a pretty good one. Might have been Dario's engine, but not quite Dario's engine. I would have done a 13.5, but it was pretty close. So it had a new rod put in it. So I'm hoping if we keep the tune pretty safe, and when you've got a really strong motor, you can keep the tune safe and still have power. So I have no worries that it will do another, hour and 30 minutes. It should be fine.
That's
Awesome. So good.
good. Yeah. What's really amazing, and I'm sure for listeners, as well, for those of us that haven't driven an 8 scale
Sorry.
GT,
Can't hear. Hang on. I go for it.
Is it
Sorry,
Scotty Ernst on the mic? Is it? He's being nice and loud as usual, or what?
Nah, that was some Japanese dude, but Scotty is loud and doing his thing, which we all love.
So I was
I
just
just
saying,
want to. Sorry, I just want to see him get up and give a really nice and close interview with Jeff when he wins and is super excited. So make sure you make that happen, Jeff.
I'm planning on it, mate. That's on the cards, I reckon.
but I think the unique thing listening to you there is just the difference
Here's
that a strong engine makes in how the car drives, right? I think that's probably something that's almost unique to 8 scale GP racing, right? Is the way the car drives is so affected by the amount of power in that bottom end that you talked about. That's really crazy. We don't see that in off-road at all, of course, but that's something that makes a big difference clearly with how your cars actually handle for you.
Yeah, 100%. And you can actually set your car up for a motor that doesn't have power and, you know, kind of extract as much as you can out of the chassis. And when you bolt power in, it kind of amplifies that decent setup. And that's sort of what happened to me. Either that or I got a really good set of tires, but you just really never know. And that's kind of the other part of our game that, you know, we open the same packet of tires like every other 100 drivers. And, you know, it's a bit of a lucky dip. I personally don't think there's a huge difference, but I didn't make any setup changes to my car. So, you know, I dropped 0.2 on average a lap. Motor, yes. Tires, maybe a little bit. I don't know. But yeah, it's a lucky dip for tires, I think, for sure.
Coming from the
Now,
hidden world over here, how many tires are you allowed to run, or is there a set amount of tires for this world?
Yeah, so it's actually really strange. There was a lot of confusion in the early days. The rule had been changed, I don't know, 12 months ago. But this is obviously the first world that they've put it to action. And the maximum amount of tires that we're allowed is 14 sets. So that's from when seeding starts until the final. We all blew through them in seeding because we all assumed that we'd have lots of tires. But then there was a bit of a shift and we're all running a second run and they were a little bit slower. And depending on what time of day, you know, you'd lose a 10th or gain a 10th. So now I think everyone's saved kind of enough, and assuming where they're starting in the finals, whether they're a quarter, an eighth, or a semi. But yeah, it's been a bit of management, which in the past has never been a problem. So it threw a little bit of a spanner in the works, I guess, for some people.
And I don't know if many of the viewers remember the Worlds in America. You had a bit of a challenge there. I think a lot of drivers were struggling to finish the 1 hour final. I'm not sure how many finished, maybe 4 or something like that. It was a pretty aggressive hour final. Do you think you're going to have that sort of issue here in Japan, or is the track different in that way, and we're likely to see more of the whole field finish?
Yeah, I think the track at Steel City in America was so grippy that it was really tough on gear. The traction here is like kind of normal. You'd put it in brackets and say it's normal high, but for sure the track's not as punishing. There's no boards to hit. You can run it in the grass. You can cut a couple of corners and, you know, not have any, I guess, repercussions with braking cars. But the other part of this one being such a short lap and having 10 cars on there that are all super fast, there's guaranteed going to be carnage. So it's one of those situations that the car is probably going to hold up, but in terms of racing other cars on track is going to be probably the main thing for attrition.
Awesome. Can't wait.
I'm looking forward to it as well. Get a day off tomorrow and rebuild the cars, and then yeah, we're good to go.
There you go. Well,
Is there any bars nearby, or like you've got a day off tomorrow? So
no, mate. There's we bought a couple of beers to celebrate and watch Super Bowl, so we'll do that tonight, and then no beers later and focus. You know,
okay,
I need all the brain capacity that I've got left.
I know.
good luck for the semis and everything, mate. I'm cheering you on.
Thanks, boys.
Oh, I'm really messing around with stuff at the moment. Before you run off there, Jeff, as well, we actually got a message from Tony asking who your mechanic is.
Oh, my mechanic is the GOAT, Michael Salvin from Serpent, so the designer of the car and, you know, the man. And he's been super helpful with setup and whatnot, but the only drama with my mechanic, he's getting a little old and he needs his glasses sometimes, so when he forgets them, it's not good.
Thank you.
I hope he's not watching this because he might not do a good job tomorrow.
Thank you.
All right, guys, I got to go. We got Super Bowl coming up, so I'm going to go get a good seat.
All right, enjoy, mate. Good luck.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. And thank you to everyone back home for all your support and well wishes. I really appreciate it.
See you, mate. Good luck.
Thanks, guys.
Take care, mate.
Peace. Bye.
All right. There we go. We are back. Wow, that was a mission from my computer side, but no, that was awesome to check in on Jeff, and Jeff's doing awesome over there. As I think we come to almost expect it from Jeff now. He seems to always just be quick, no matter what he runs, whether it be a GT car or 8-scale off-road, and just real versatile all around in every category. So real top-class driver. And I've been meaning to actually have a chat with Jesse Davies as well on Mitch and the mic. Possibly do that after the Worlds now. Now, I know we're on time constraints at the moment, running down a little bit on time, I believe, for yourself here now, Ben. Is correct? Yep. So we'll start to sort of wrap things up. If there are any last-minute questions, but jump on in, chat away. There's a couple for Jeff there. Damn, Jeff is looking tan from Jared. Yeah, was looking coloured. Yes, very nice and tanned. But yeah, any sort of final comments and stuff from you guys after the Nationals weekend that we had?
Well, there's probably still a couple of other amendments for rules that I was thinking. If we look at IFMAR, especially for the final, their rule is 13 car final, so it would be 6 and 6 out of each semi, and then the LCQ progresses one driver. And I think probably 13 cars is probably a better number for a final, especially on that track. The track was pretty tight, so probably would have been better if there was probably 2 less cars on the track. Obviously, that's a difficult decision to make, but in most cases we try to align with IFMAR, and the 15 cars is a little bit of a strange one to me if we follow IFMAR for 95% of rules. So that's probably something to consider. The LCQ, I believe, is 10 minutes. I think there's probably argument there to make it at least 15. They'll just add the fuel stop in there. But again, it does, Shane Kelly won it by doing a no fuel stop, which is a challenge in itself. And props to him for putting in the main and driving good through the LCQ. But we all know the LCQ can be probably a little bit chaotic, and that's probably spurred on by it being 10 minutes. If we don't have a clean start, then you're going to need to drive pretty aggressive, I suppose, to get to the front to win it. But if it's a little bit longer in the run, then really is going to be the best driver that comes out of it. And even 15 or 20 minutes, really, that would probably make it a bit better.
We'll let you go, Ben. Thank you so much for joining us as well, Ben. Zach, if you do want to hold on, we'll have a bit more of a chat about the sort of side of stuff as well. Thank you so much for joining us.
I've probably still got half an hour. So good on you, Benny.
Thanks, Mitch. Thanks, boys. I might try and jump back in 10 minutes. I just got to square one thing off at work, but I'll talk to you later. Thanks, fellas.
Too easy. All righty. We'll see you in a bit.
Thanks, mate.
All righty. We'll change this around and hopefully it'll look a little bit better all around. So let's go to this and this. Oh, no, that's not right. There we go.
There we go.
That's better. But yeah, actually, good point on the sort of 13 car driver side of things. I think it would be tough on the drivers to sort of miss out by that 1 or 2 positions, but at the same time, definitely likely would create better racing in certain ways as well. So it's a good point.
Oh, we've lost Mitch, have we?
And there we go. My bad.
You're back.
I pressed the wrong button then again for the second time.
No, you're right.
Yeah,
I mean, if you look back, it's having 15 cars is great, and for whoever's 14th and 15, that's awesome that they've made the final. But if you look back at when we first started racing, it was 10 car final. So Femke's Australian titles, it was 10 cars, and there was no LCQ. So I don't know. I think 13 cars is a pretty reasonable amount, and probably it is probably difficult to say. But the 14th and 15th, their pace is probably not as quick as the top group. So This is the whole point of having an A main final is to find out, who's going to be the winner at the end of the day. And if we've got so many cars on the track, especially the starts can be pretty difficult. And this probably leads into another rule. We sort of spoke about it during the track walk, and we do so much qualifying, 5-10 minute qualifying runs, and then we line up on the grid separated by effectively a meter. And the starts weren't too bad, but even if you watch back the A main, I was probably the last of the front pack because as we went through the crow's foot, I think Craig got tagged, and then that just bunched up that whole group from like 7th through to 15. So separating the grid out probably like as much as we possibly can, and like I'm pretty sure you can even have the car either side of the loop. It doesn't really matter. I think there's some settings in Live RC that you can play with to say, okay, from the buzzer you've got 20 seconds before you can record a lap time, for instance. And just like spread the grid out. Like if you had in the rule like 2 meters or 3 meters as a minimum, and then you just separated the grid as much as you could, because you want to reward whoever got a TQ, for instance, or qualified really well. They need to have as clear a track as they possibly can at the start of the main to make sure they have the best opportunity to stay with the front pack as they can. When you space your grid down to a meter, for instance, it's just only the slightest incident that can just cause the whole grid to crash and bunch up. And if there's some options there to expand the grid out and put it in the rules, because there's nothing really prescribed in the rules, the grids just end up being the distance that they possibly, well, whatever they are. I think that would definitely improve the racing. I know we try and spread out the grids as much as we can. When we had a FEMCA race in Malaysia, this was probably 8 years ago, we actually put in a protest during the race because the grids were like half a meter. And then they just said, well, there's nothing in the rules, so you can just put it whatever you want. And at that point, it's like, well, there should be some learnings out of that. But we ended up spacing the grids out to like 3 or 4 meters between the cars. And, you might think, 4 meters, that's a fair distance between the cars. But in reality, once you start the buzzer, you make up that 4 meters if you have a good start or whatever. And the cars end up being somewhat close together, but it's enough to make sure that the first lap people aren't running into each other. And it definitely made the racing better because the starts were a bit cleaner.
Yeah, I'm going back through the rules there because I thought there was actually a rule that said they had to be spaced out by a minimum of 600 mils, but not much on that. But yeah, I can't even find that, to be perfectly honest. And as you mentioned, it would be good to be able to just space them out further. You could space them onto that sort of front straight for that track, not a problem. And there is settings and stuff on at least lifetime that allows you to say have first cars passing over the grid not count for a lap.
Right.
So at least for the first, say, 15 seconds or something along those lines, if I remember correctly. So it's definitely doable, and there's no reason why it couldn't/shouldn't be done. There's no real argument when it comes to it should be closer racing for the start. That's the sort of things. In the end, we end up just piling on into the turn 1, turn 2, and for that track, it was the crow's foot. You end up having, say, 15 cars going into one corner where the speed entering the crow's foot was, we were talking 60, 70k an hour or something like that, going down to all of 10k's now.
Stopped.
And and certain cars are different lines, and that is always going to create problems. There's never an easy solution in certain ways, but I think probably the easiest solution would be to spread the grids out a little bit more. And don't mind me if a couple of things move around. Hopefully I don't exit the stream. I'm going to try and fix our positions up a little bit. So if it jumps around a bit, don't fear. Best moment from the actual weekend. What would you say your best moment or most enjoyable moment? There we go. That's much better already. Most enjoyable moment from the weekend was?
Well, man, I've been racing with Alex since he was like, I don't know, 13 or something. And I've seen over the years just how much effort and work he's put in to improve his driving, and to see him finally, get rewarded for all that work that he's done and come away with the win. It's not my result. It's all his, and that it was just rewarding to see. And yeah, hats off to Alex. And I know, he drove from, I think it was 12th on the grid or something, and he was in the lead by about 10 minutes or so. So pretty crazy speed for him to come through the field like that, and just a well-deserved win. Really classy dude, and this is the one that he's been trying to get for a long time, as people have probably observed for the last couple of years. He's had some mega battles with Kyle, and this time he's got the win. And congrats to him and his dad for all the work that they've put in to get the Australian titles.
Yeah, no, for sure. And it's no easy task. I think a lot of people entering the game or the hobby sort of think, oh, I could be quicker than that person. It looks so simple because these guys are driving the cars at a pace and at a skill level that is exceptional. It is beyond comprehension. When we look back at results, Alex ended up being, I think, 2 to 3 laps on the rest of the field. It's just that next step. And McBride would have been on a similar, he was on a similar pace, especially early in the run before his issues and started popping up. And it is just a whole nother level. You tend to see the sort of stages of drivers sort of progress as they get quicker and quicker, and they go from a good driver to a really good driver or a great driver, and the great drivers end up leveling up to the, realistically a professional level driver. And that's the sort of level that these guys are, and they're competing at that sort of level. And it's good to see it in Australia, but nonetheless, it's good to see it in general to, bear witness to it. As for Alex's win from a nationals, as you mentioned, he's been slaving away at that for years. We saw it with Aaron Stringer. I quite often compare it to Aaron Stringer's results and stuff. We saw Aaron coming up against an extremely strong Carl McBride for years on years on years, before he turned to sort of other hobbies, that sort of side of things. But just the relentless speed that we've sort of seen from McBride for the last 12 years, 11 national titles to his name, and not against average Joe races, against some of the best in the world. To be able to put that on year after year is incredible. And I end up congratulating him after the event just for, how well he's done for the past 12 years. And I'm sure he'll keep racing in some format for the next however many years. And it's just good to see him trackside more than anything. So,
yeah, I mean, if you look at the last sort of probably 10 years, I would say there's probably it's only been the Aaron and Kyle show. They were really the clear pace setters, and there's not really anyone else that was going to contend for the win. I know Craig Lawton probably was the clear third place behind them. He had some pretty good runs and was probably the next closest. And credit to him. Even this race meet, he's not really even had a race this year, and still was super fast in the final. But now I think we're starting to see that there's probably a few more at the very top. I think Dexter and Caleb probably setting the similar sort of lap speed. So yeah, it's interesting to see. Hey, like it's not just 2 people anymore. It's probably 4 or potentially even 5 that are sort of at that level now where they can really potentially put in a TQ run. And like Dexter got a TQ run, and his pace this weekend really stepped up. And I know he's just moved to that car, but credit to him for getting his head around the car. It shows the TLR is obviously a really, really good package, and 40's having a good result with it as well. Like his lap speed's excellent. So yeah, it's pretty cool to see the racing scene where it is now, and it just makes it a bit more exciting when there's 4 or 5 drivers that potentially could TQ around or compete at the front end of a race. And this is where we could probably move into the next section, and that's just around probably driver etiquette. It is probably going to be a bit more important when there's more drivers that are at the same pace and that are super fast. And if you do go through the rules, there's not a real clear definition around what constitutes, poor driver behavior, whether it be just hitting a driver or the process of what constitutes a stop-go penalty, for instance. And just because drivers are super fast doesn't mean that they can just hit a driver and then just drive away.
Yep.
And, this is the failing probably from this event was probably just that there wasn't a clearly defined race referee. I know, there was an incident there with Andrew Ford and Caleb, and you called for the issue to be rectified on the track, and it wasn't. And it's not really on you as a commentator to be the race referee. And if it is your responsibility, then I guess that needs to be clearly outlined before the event, and to the drivers as well. So the drivers know that you are the race referee, or whoever it is and they'll be making the call. And there is obviously a condition in the rules that if you get called for a stop go and you don't stop, then after the event or after the race is concluded, it's a 1 lap penalty. In this instance, obviously a stop go wasn't called because we didn't really have a race referee. And so there was just a bit of ambiguity there. And, that's probably just a learning for the next race. It's going to be whoever puts their hands up to be the race referee going to have to understand they're probably going to need to make some controversial calls. And obviously whichever driver it is going to be saying that they weren't in the wrong. And that's natural. I don't know how many times we've probably seen Lewis Hamilton complain about the stewards, but that's just the way it's goes. Someone's got to make a call, and in this instance, I think you made the right call. I think it should have been addressed on track, and it wasn't. And we just need to probably understand what sort of culture we want in the racing scene. When I grew up, I always was sort of entrenched with the people that I race with that, if you hit another car to pass them, that's probably not an acceptable pass, especially if you touch that driver and the car goes outside of the line, for instance, or, definitely if it goes off the track. So we probably need to start thinking about how we put that in the rules and obviously enforce it. And that comes back down to making sure that RCRA puts in a race referee, especially for the A-main. I think that's with the competition that we've got now. Like I said, there's not 2 drivers going for a potential win. It's probably 4 or 5 drivers. So it's going to start to get pretty heated at the top. And, everyone wants to win. That's fine. But yeah, in this instance, it's important that we have the structure in place, and that's the rules. And I don't know if you can share the screen at all, Mitch, and show just some schematics that I sort of drew up before, of sort of like if a car hits another car from the side, it's probably only really acceptable if it's wheel to wheel. If the cars are like hitting each other at 90 degrees, then obviously that's a stop go. Have something there to be able to describe or explain what would constitute poor behavior or poor driving, or what's unacceptable. Everyone's going to have their views on this one. That's very, very difficult, but we're going to need to put something in place. Otherwise, I think it's probably only going to get more heated when we go to the next race.
Yeah. Kind of race how you want to be raced as well, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there is a lot to be said for that. There was some pretty clear cases of poor driving over the weekend, and you're going to get some which are marginal. But if someone leaves a door open and it's a bump but cars don't explode off the track, well, that's legit. That's probably okay. We in Australia, I think, have really clean racing. I have a lot of respect for the way we race in Australia. I think it's a lot better than the majority of racing that I see and have participated in globally. I think a lot of it just comes back to, race how you want to be raced.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, as you mentioned there as well, Zach, like it does come down to opinion in certain ways for a referee to how they would call it. Like I know from the 10 scale worlds, and I know it's not overly comparable in certain ways, but from the 10 scale worlds, they were calling pretty much any incident. Like you would tap someone, and they would tell you to give the position back, whether it be a side-on-side contact, literally no matter what. It was you give the pass back, which in a lot of ways is over the top. But at the same time, you just have to race cleaner. It's a case of, well, you just get to give the other person a bit more room. And in the end, we are talking about toy cars. We're talking about cars that are, all of a foot wide and that are, 30, 35 meters away from where you're standing, when you're standing also another 5 meters up in the air. So judging the exact distance from the other car it's not as easy as going, okay, well, the car is 2.5 millimeters away from my inside tire. I can't turn any further out that way. You're going to hit a bump, and that's what's going to happen. A little bit of dust or a rock on the track can shoot you into their car, and that does happen, and it will happen, and it's going to happen again. But at the same time, if it does happen, you have to address that sort of situation from a reasonable standpoint. You have to go, okay, well, that wasn't right. I have to get that back and do it better next time. And that, I think a lot of that does, as you mentioned, come down to just general driver etiquette. So
and we need to talk it about a bit more. You know what I mean? Like it's just something that we've probably never really talked about much. And setting good driver etiquette and setting that culture is so important. And it needs to be pretty clearly defined and enforced at the start of the meeting. And I think if we do that, then there's no ambiguity around it, we go from there.
Yeah. Scotty Guy was spot on. And if you guys saw the comment that he put up, right? But you need a separate race referee from the commentator. They're two distinctly different roles, and they shouldn't cross over. And I think the other thing that you need in the race referee is you need an experienced racer, right? You need someone who understands how these cars drive, what is legitimate. You don't just need, someone that hasn't raced before. I don't think that's also the right thing. I think you need someone with good racing experience.
Even recent racing experience, to be perfectly honest. I know, once again, I feel as if that was probably one of the biggest issues coming from the Worlds was it was an ex-racer, but he hadn't raced seemingly in what felt like a long time. He just didn't understand the dynamics of general overtakes. When you did, say, tag wheels, if you did have an inside line actually overtaking someone, you pretty much had made the pass, and then there was some form of contact, whether it be your fault or the other driver's fault. No matter what, the driver that was making the pass ended up having to relinquish the position, and that is just an over top side of things. There was drivers getting penalty when it wasn't pretty much almost anything to do with them. So it has to be a sensible sort of side of things. Like, as you mentioned, a referee that has a lot of experience probably within the game, someone that's not sort of new into it, just trying to help out, because helping out's one thing, but overstepping in certain ways is a whole nother ball game and a whole nother issue. So that definitely makes it tough to sort of go, all right, well, this is a person that has ample amount of experience, but just happens to go to an RC event and not want to race. There's very few of those sort of people.
Yeah.
So,
and that's why some of these things need to be considered as a paid position. It's a very important position, and that RCRA's got some good funds. They want to make sure we're doing all the right things. We're putting the media side of stuff. All the events are extremely professionally run. I feel this is just one of the small pieces that we can add on to improve the professionalism. One thing when Ben and I went to Neo Buggy, they had some race referees there, and I got a call for a stop go, and I didn't think it was right, but that's the way it goes, man. But that event was probably the most professional race that I've ever been to. Like, they really had it down pat, and we just need to make sure that we've got a little bit of money put aside for whoever wants to do it, even if they're just putting it in for the finals, because that's when the racing's happening.
yeah.
And they get $500 for the day or whatever it is, and then you're definitely guaranteed to get someone put their hand up for it and do the job properly.
Yeah, it's definitely a necessity within the hobby. For as close as our racing is, as small the car are, and the distance away from the driver's stand, that sort of side of things, it's a necessity.
Yeah, and it's amazing how quickly things would change, right?
Yeah.
Like, the RCA does it better than I think anyone, and they know, they've got a guy on their stand for their national series. you get called, you have to have a stop go or whatever the penalty is. And I think they've got some of the cleanest driving in the world because of that, right? They know that there is going to be a punishment. So it doesn't take long, little slap on the hand, and people get used to it, right? And they change their driving style or their attempts at passing, and everything's better off for it.
Yeah. And just to reiterate as well, this isn't a shot at any single driver or even RCRA in general. This is just sort of one of those sort of things that needs to be brought up after almost every meeting. It's just one of those incidents that it's going to happen. It's going to happen again. And the RCRA crew, committee, Tom, that sort of side of things have done an incredible job when it comes to the event. The drivers, there realistically was minimal situations where anyone, whether it be purposely or non-purposely, came in contact with another driver for an overtake and didn't relinquish the sort of pass. So that sort of side of things was
absolutely.
incredible.
This is all just learnings, man. Like,
yeah,
it's not personal. It's literally just us talking about what can be improved, and if we don't act on the learnings, then that's poor. But for sure, I think these learnings can be improved on, and if you look back at from where the RCRA events are now to where they were even 4 or 5 years ago, we've come leaps and bounds, and it's only going to get better if we keep refining things and improving things for the next race.
Yeah. On an entry level, we actually saw a couple of drivers that were very new to the hobby at the national titles over in Perth. I think Dion, I had struggled pronouncing his last name throughout the entirety of the event. I think it was Kahawanda or along those lines. Do you see the nationals as somewhat of an entry level event, or do we sort of see it as something that sort of experienced drivers, not limited to, but that sort of side of things? What's your thoughts when it comes to that thing?
For me, it's you need those drivers. If you don't have those drivers, we're not having an RCRA event because we can't afford to put it on. And if you look at the tallies of what it costs to run an event, if you're not getting probably a minimum of 100 entries, you're not even breaking even. If we want to have media, we want to make sure that all the drivers have a pit table, there's lights for the track, there's a canteen, there's toilets, like all of the above. You need to have a minimum of 100 drivers. And like that's probably a bare minimum, really. Like we probably should be aiming for 150 to make sure that we've got enough money to fund the event. My opinion is it's really open to all skill levels because we need it to be.
Yeah,
I think we have to, right? I think it's a really good one. For me, it's super close to home because I was like, do I bring my son who started racing a couple of years ago, do I bring him over, let him race e-buggy? So I ummed and ahed on it for a while. I decided not to this year, but I will next year. But we need as many people as we can racing. And I think it's awesome, right? If people are only beginning, but they get to come and experience the nationals and, see what it's like, see how it all works. That's one of the great things about our hobby, our sport is, no matter where you are on the skill level or how long you've been in the sport, you can go race against the top guys. You don't get that, going playing a tennis tournament or a golf tournament or wherever it might be. So I'm all for it. At the end of the day, they're going to race in the final, where they seed into and where their speed is. So they're not going to be racing against the top guys unless they come out swinging.
Yeah. If you look at the RCGP series, we went to the first round of that in Manila, and it was a really weird feeling. Like, obviously, we weren't part of the top group, and the top group was separated. They were put in their own little special area. And that was sort of the first event that I'd been to where, you weren't sitting with with everyone together. And they did this like separation of where people were pitting by skill level, and it just felt really weird, and whenever you go to like a Worlds, for instance, obviously, the skill difference between the top 20 drivers and the rest of the field are probably going to be pretty big because they're professionals. But that's what makes it awesome going to a Worlds. You get to hang out with top drivers, see what they do, and learn from the top drivers. And that would be the same thing, obviously, on a smaller scale at the Australian titles. But for those guys that came and they might be starting out, they still get exposure to some really good drivers, and they get to see, how they work on their car. Okay, man, this guy's working on his car after every run, and he's going through all the screws. Okay, that's what I need to do to be better. And that's the good thing about RC, is that it involves everyone from different age groups to different skill levels, and you can be an average Joe and hang out in the pits with David Runnefolk or Robert Battle, and get to see what they do to be fast. And for sure, that's what I enjoy about RC and going away overseas and going to big events, is just the off track fun that you can have in the pits with top drivers as well.
Yeah, I think when I look back to when I started in 10 scale in the late 80s, and you were surrounded at nationals or state titles by whether it's Darren Campbell or Rick Bartolozzi, and you'd be learning from them, and that's what it's all about, right? Is for people who are new in the sport to be able to learn from others, and no better place at a nationals. It's not a scary thing at the end of the day. Like I said, you're only going to race against the people who are of similar speed and skill to you. So let's make it as big as we can get it.
Yeah, for sure. Actually, I touched on it as well before with Zach. Favorite moment out of the nationals, Ben?
Oh, good question. Favorite moment. She hasn't even thought about that one, Mitch. Probably for me, just watching all the young blokes. Watching the progression of as some of the young drivers. When I think about what Christian Will Hunter's done in the last year, like him and I raced really, really close last year for the last spot direct into the main, and I pipped him, and this year he's miles ahead of that. So he's done awesome. So for me, the highlights kind of looking around and just watching the progression of some of the young blokes, I think is really it's really good. Zach Foster, like I said before, is killing it. Harry, all of the young blokes just coming along is really, really good. They're getting to grips with running the longer mains. You see that progression where they're good in a qualifier, not so good in the longer runs. It takes them a couple of years. Cooper had a really good run in qualifying with me in I think it was Q6. We had a stellar run. I think he was 10th. I was 11th for the round. And then he went into having a pretty good semi, almost got through, and then had the issues in the LCQ. So you just watch all of the development of those guys. That for me is probably the highlight.
Yeah, fair enough. Zach, we have to let you go. You have to run off now, mate. I appreciate you jumping on the show as well, mate. I really do, and I'm sure we will talk soon, mate. Thank you very much.
No worries. Thanks, boys. Good chat, and I'll see you at the next one.
See you, mate.
Yep.
All right, we'll switch over to this. There we go, and hopefully that's the right one. No, that's not the right one. It's close. That's not it either. Nope, that's not it. Nope, it's getting worse. There we go. We found it. Obviously the young kids coming up and through the advanced stages of the youngsters, and making their way up the ranks. It's really cool to see. My partner sort of just starting having a bit of a run here and there, and I said to her the most enjoyable part of racing is sort of seeing yourself come up through the ranks and seeing yourself get quicker and quicker. But it's also good to sort of see it from a viewership sort of side of things, of other people coming up through the ranks and getting quicker, and seeing how they progress. It is a really, really interesting thing to see and we can see it, a lot of the time it's only for interstate drivers once a year. At a national title, we see someone like Zach just turn up, and from the previous year, he probably maybe just scraping into the top 15 to this year, solidifying himself into the top 15. That's that sort of side of things, just improvement year on year on year. So it is interesting, to say the least. We'll start to wind it up anyway. If there's any other comments or questions on coming out of the nationals, as Scotty just mentioned there, and that's gathering the tribe. And that is one big thing. We all sort of get together, have a lot of banter, and drive some toy cars around a purpose-built facility that's quite incredible, that's for sure. Any other takeaways that you sort of noticed from the event, Ben?
Oh, look, I think, overall, like I said at the beginning, just a really good vibe to the event. Everyone was happy to be there. I think the weather played its part, which was great. Track was good. And then a little bit of talk already about where do we go next year. And I think the big surprise for a few of us, you get my dates right, you might have them in front of you, but I think we're going to South Australia in April, if my memory is correct.
March, I have it down for.
March.
I did get a call from Tom though, so I think they potentially looking at moving the date. I'm not 100% sure on that, so we'll let the South Australia guys sort of sort that. But I think there was a bit of a clash with dates when it comes to RCRA media, and there was potential of moving the dates. I'm not. I don't want to talk on their behalf, but that I think that was a potential at least. So at the moment, the current dates are March 21st to 24th, but that might change depending on scenarios.
We'll have to wait for confirmation of that. That was a little bit of a curveball. We'll see. Obviously, it depends on schedules, and I know they were looking at weather and things for Adelaide, but that will come around pretty quickly if that's in March. So yeah, that was a big one. Look, for me, I think just a great race all around. Really well supported. I think the interesting thing was watching how many e-buggies there were, right? So we're seeing the e-buggy class grow, which I think is really, really good. For me, I think it's a really good place for people to start. We see at Zach's home track at BDR, I think the e-buggies always outweigh nitro buggies. So that's great. I always talk about racing electric as a nice entry into 8-scale buggy racing. You don't have to worry about dealing with the engines. You don't need a pit man with you all the time. There is that more complexity of racing nitro buggy. It's where I started my son, just in 8-scale electric. I'll move him probably in the back half of December over to running a nitro buggy and start him on that. But we definitely see that picking up, and that's not only here in Australia, right? We're seeing e-buggy pick up all over the world. So, it's great. Hopefully that brings in some new people, which is also what we're looking for. Yeah,
for sure. Solid points there as well. We actually got a comment from Chris Lander. He's been commenting through the stream. Do we need 10-minute heats? It's actually an interesting question as well. What's your sort of take on that? Do you think the fuel stops are sort of a necessary evil, or do you enjoy the fuel stops for a qualifying 10-minute run?
Yeah, you have to have 10-minute runs for nitro buggy. I mean, that's what it's all about, right? There's so much to nitro buggy in terms of the pitman. So for me, yes, my answer is unequivocally, yeah, we need 10-minute runs for qualifying. I also think it adds another dimension. A lot happens in those last few minutes of a qualifier. If you go back and take a look at some of the changes in terms of who's leading in the last 3 minutes versus just a 7-minute dash, it does make a difference. And I think it rewards those that, have their pits sorted out and, have a really good pit man, and that's clean. You can make up a couple of seconds with a really good pit stop. So I'm all for it. And Chris Lander, you should be, because, your son will be racing nitro soon and you're going to be pitting for him.
Yeah, he's had an add-on question on that as well. Do you want 150 entries? I'm guessing that comes back to the pitmen not being able to race as much or something along those lines. So I'm sure he'll clarify and somewhat shortly. For entries, I actually saw a comment early on. Their entries for the event, I think, was around the 86 mark. Sorry, the drivers for the event was 86. Entries was almost 200.
Yeah, about entries, right? Like, it's how much money can the club put in their bank. That's what I'm all about there. So if we had a couple of hundred entries, I think we did really well. It was 200 entries in how it ran. It was a flawless event. And that probably, generated some good income, not as much as the club needed, given that Martin said it was like a $12,000 rebuild for the track.
Yeah. And Christian sort of put on there as well. I think so, because of traffic, you can take a fuel stop and get clean track. And it just adds that sort of, difference in, as mentioned there, you can get out of traffic, take your fuel stop, run hard for 3 laps, wait for their fuel stops, and next thing you know, you have clear track back in front of you again. It adds that strategy into the racing sort of side of things. And heck, if you can run a 10-minute qualifier, then why not? If you are comfortable in running 10 minutes, then go for it. And we saw Shane Kelly actually do that in the LCQ. A little bit different situation than qualifying 10-minute runs, but
Oh, well,
nonetheless different.
that was me. That was me every single run, mate.
Yeah, right. There you go.
Yep. Every qualifier, all through the semis, all through the main, 10-minute stops. So it works.
Right.
Yeah, if you can make it work, it's great. And like Christian said, being able to short fill or go long and give yourself a window with traffic makes a huge difference.
Yep. Running a 10-minute run, we'll start to wrap this up. I know you have to head off. Running a 10-minute run, what do you sort of set your tune for? Or do you sort of have a motor, say, that you know that just runs 10 minutes in every circumstance? Or is it heat related? Give me a sort of general gist for a 10-minute run.
Yeah, there's not one thing that gets you a 10-minute run, right? It's a whole lot of things. The way the car's set up, the way the engine's tuned, you know, the Venturi that you're using, the clutch that you're using, you know, the way you drive at the track. The track makes a really big difference, right? So it depends on what the track's like in terms of the amount of jumps and things that you've got, how hard you're getting on the throttle. Some tracks you can get it, some tracks you can't. It's just really track dependent. I knew coming here that I thought it would make a pretty big difference. When I saw the track, I thought that would be a track that would be difficult to run clean on for a whole 10 minutes because of that left-hand side of the track. I didn't think that double going onto the straight would create as much chaos in qualifying that it did. So I thought, you know, if I could get 10 minutes, it would be a big advantage. You know, it saves a few seconds. So for me, it was like, well, if I can't run 10 minutes clean, I can probably pick up the saving of a crash and a fuel stop. So that was my thinking. And yeah, the program worked, had an engine that would do it, and the setup to support it.
Yeah. And yeah, there is quite an advantage to it, as you mentioned. There's probably about a 4-second fuel up time, let alone the actual time driving in and actually out of the pits. And that's a clean run in and through the pits. It easily can take 7 to 10 seconds, you know, and a mediocre sort of stop. And that was a pretty tricky entry to pit lane. We saw a lot of drivers, and including big name drivers, struggling to get into that pit lane as well. Such a tight entry into the pit lane. But yeah. All good, mate. We'll wrap this up, at least for yourself. I might have a bit more of a chat afterwards about the overall event, that sort of side of things for myself. But I appreciate you jumping on as well as Zach Ryan. Obviously, it's been a great chat. We've been talking for over 2 hours, which is a long stream, long time to talk. And we really appreciate you jumping on and having a chat for Mitch on the mic, and also about the RCRA national titles.
Thanks for having me, mate. Really appreciate it. Enjoy it. Talk later.
All good, mate. We'll see you around. All right, we'll change a few things. Just give me 1 second, guys. That one there. There we go. All righty. So yeah, great chat there from both Zach Ryan. Oh, geez, it's playing around with me again. Oh, that's not the one. Sooner or later, we'll work it out. Nope. Doesn't want to do it. Doesn't even want to change now. Great. Alrighty, you're going to get my big head on the screen now by the looks of it. So I'm going to just move back a little bit further. There we go. That makes it a little bit better. Doesn't have such a big head on camera. Actually found out recently, weird comment on big heads. I have a very small head according to my partner and also my workmates. So it's not such a big head. Overall event was really good. As mentioned, the RCRA crew, like, they did an awesome event. You know, in setting up the timesheets, the schedule, that sort of side of things was impeccable. The committee, the MORBC committee, had done a standout job on the facility. The food, like the food options and stuff, were great as well. Let's tilt that down a bit as well. Food options was great. It was simple. You know, you had chicken burgers or beef burgers. You had fried chips. Everything you need for, you know, RC event, for all of our RC, you know, unruly RC crowd. As mentioned, takeaways from the event, the very few negatives and so many positives, and those negatives aren't sort of directed in a negative way, but just you know, what we could potentially do better in the future, and looking towards the future in such a good way. We have so many like things that we could do to expand on our hobby and to make it even better than what it already is. I mean, we have such a great hobby. It's a hobby that's given me so much in my past, and you know, I'm looking forward to the future with being within the hobby. I have a lot of passion, obviously, for the hobby. But the event overall was just impeccable. The way it was run, the watering, the blowing crew, and that sort of side of things, they did a standout job as well. it can't be said enough how good the track crew actually worked on the track in between, runs. They had a time limit of roughly 10 minutes to completely blow off the entire track with about 3 blowers, and then with 4 hoses just soak the track to get the moisture into the track and keep it from blowing out. And they did an impeccable job throughout the weekend of both the time restraints and also, the actual track conditions. There was very few sections of the actual track that did blow out to a point where, you had cars kicking off the track or anything like that wasn't there at the start of the event. Mike Lawler's just jumped on, and I'll chuck that comment up as well. We did mention dates. Nats 2024, 21st, 22nd, 23rd, and 24th of March. I know I did get a message to say might move around a bit. I'm sure that'll all come out in time. But at the moment, that's the current date for the national titles for the 8 scale portion. And any changes, I'm sure the South Australia Committee, they'll put everything and anything up that needs to come up. So keep an eye on that early in the year. So there's not a big turnaround time between current Nats and next Nats. So it's going to be a bit of a change from the past few years. Obviously, nationals in Sunny Coast, up in Queensland, and over in Western Australia, they were about a good year apart, and then all of a sudden we have about a 6-month break until the next one. So that's going to be a bit of a difference. As for weather point, and as I think Ben said there, they're probably looking at the weather and looking at the time of year that's probably most suitable for the nationals, and that's what they sort of picked out. Live streaming and stuff, I'm sure they will work something out when it comes to that. We're so privileged in the way that we have RCRA media to host our events nowadays that it's almost, I feel as if for large events especially, it's almost coming an expectation. We've had 10 scale nationals in the past that all I've done to help out with streaming is just set my phone up and or a GoPro up, and that's been somewhat sufficient. It's not been good and it's not been great by any means, but now with RC Race Media taking on big jobs such as the nationals, it's coming more and more to the point where we almost expect it. And like we mentioned earlier in the stream, those guys do an absolute standout job. Realistically, a job that is quite honestly as good, if not better, than the big names for live streaming around the world. Other than that, really good nationals event. I'm glad to have my voice back. I struggle a bit on Sunday, as I'm sure a lot of people were commenting on the stream. Jamie Cramp, I didn't miss your comment. Yes, Strepsils were hot on the go. I think I went through almost an entire packet for the week, and then my dumb self decided to leave the packet at home on Sunday, which is probably one of the big reasons as to why I was so croaky. But nonetheless, great event. Definitely big takeaways and stuff to get from the event, to improve it on both my side and, the committee sort of side. That's everything like that, but it's all positive in the end. I'll start to wrap it up there. Any other comments, questions, and that sort of side of things, feel free to chuck them in. Don't usually say this because I usually forget most of the time, but massive thank you has to go out to the sponsors of the stream. All the 4 that you can see on the screen at the moment, Campbelltown Hobbies, Chargers RC, Hybrid Landscapes, and OAD, Ocean Acoustic Developments. They've all helped me get to the point we are now, where we're talking about such incredible events that we've been to in the past, and getting some form of media there, as well as RC Race Media. Those guys are covering the majority of it. But yeah, any comments, questions, positive feedback, negative feedback even, by all means, drop it on in. Like I take feedback as well as possible to try and improve everything. And that's one great thing as well I wanted to mention as I babble on about random stuff. Tony Firth is one of the best people to talk about when it comes to feedback in general. Generally, like he'll spin things, or not spin things, he'll talk about things in a better light. If there's some form of a negative feedback, he'll make it so that you can improve this on this way, and that's such a good thing to sort of talk about. Nonetheless, going off on a tangent. Overall, incredible event. Drivers and stuff was epic to see so many people make the trip over. I know it's not an easy journey. It's not a cheap journey for anyone on the East Coast. at the same time, anyone that races over on the West Coast knows that it's not cheap. And for them to have a nationals where they don't have to travel $850 flights to get to the East Coast on, 2 to 3 times a year to be competing against other national level drivers, such as, say, like Aaron Dexter. We don't see him at too many other major events. It's good to be able to go over there and, see so many big name drivers actually make the trip, as well as, just drivers in general making that trip, because it is quite a big trip. Let's see. Agreed with the call with the bum. To finish with honor, the driver would have stopped. Great job calling the event. Yeah. On that, as mentioned, like, I'm not gonna go bang on about it too much. Caleb's, he's a great young driver, incredible talent, and I don't doubt that we'll see him in the top 3 for years to come when it comes to nationals. It's a sort of thing that, once again, it probably should have been taken out of my hands if we had a race referee. At the same time, it's sort of one of those sort of hard things that it's not a race. It wasn't quite a racing incident. It went past the racing incident sort of side of things. And in the end, it happened. You have to sort of move forward from it. I personally would apologize to Andrew Ford for that sort of incident, to not be able to do more in certain ways, to be perfectly honest. Unless, don't want to go on too much about it. We sort of covered it a little bit earlier on. Yep, great media. Yeah, the RCRA media crew are incredible, impeccable with their job. Matt and Tony, their job is like crazy. If anyone, I should have gotten some video of how they sort of run around all the time, 24/7, especially Tony going in and out of the booth, literally would be sprinting up the stairs or sprinting up the driver's stand to get back in and help with running the stream, and then would all of a sudden just duck out and go back to fuel stops, or go back to, say, interviewing a driver, or when McBride, say, had issues, he would run down and see what the issue with McBride was and have a really quick chat with McBride to see what was going on, if they could fix the car. And when we found out it wasn't a quick and easy fix, he was able to cover what the issue was, that sort of side of things. And then from there, on top of that, was able to sort of pass it on to me via the headsets, and I could sort of talk about it on the stream and actually update people as to what the actual go was. So it just made it really, really interesting from, a viewership standpoint. And it's a side that we haven't had a huge amount in the past in Australia, but it's coming, which is great. It is coming a lot quicker than I expected, to be perfectly honest. And I think it's almost a necessity, as I mentioned before, at major events. So going forward, I'd like to see all major events running live streaming up to the standard of RC Race Media. Martin Alliter has jumped on and said, yeah, those guys are legends. But yeah, I know I had something else I was going to babble on about quickly, completely forgotten, which is great. So with that in mind, I'll wrap it up before I babble on for too much longer. Alrighty, guys. Thank you so much for jumping on in, guys. I'm going to have a big head for a second here whilst I get a little bit closer to the laptop. Thank you very much for jumping on in here, guys. And comments, that sort of side of things. I do appreciate all the comments throughout the stream, whether it be directed toward Ben or Zach or myself even. Yeah, for future streams and all that sort of stuff, liking, sharing, that sort of side of things really helps out. And on top of that, really appreciate, say, Zach and Ben for jumping onto the stream and making it just as entertaining as I think what everyone sort of expected out of it. So I appreciate, the time that those guys are taking out of their daily ritual and daily life to jump on and have a bit of a gin wag. Apart from that, thank you so much, guys, and we'll see you in the next one, whoever I talk to and whatever we babble on about then. Alrighty, guys. We'll see you later.